Hi everyone, in the last video we started creating a React Headless component library. So we started with creating a button component. Now in this video we are going to create a drop-down list component. So let's get straight into the code. Just before we start, I've just created an empty TypeScript tsx file. Now I'll just quickly go to what the component actually is. Now if you look at here, we require three main components. So one is the trigger or the main element which will be responsible for initiation, and then we need a drop down list or a drop down menu, and then within that menu each menu item, so that could be of any kind of design. So that's the basic structure of the drop down list or the drop down component. So let's dive into the code now. Right, so we will just start with importing some of the required libraries, and then we will start creating the component. So first of all, we'll just import the React and the use effect, use state, use ref, all these variables. Now we are going to also import our class names library, which is really important in creating these flexible components. And we will need the up and down arrow icon as well. So I use React icons library for this. So you can use any library that you like. Right now, so we have included the imports. Now let's switch to defining some of the types or the interfaces that we need. So one more point that I want to emphasize here is, while creating these flexible component libraries that we want to use within multiple projects, or if we want to create a library that other people can use, what we need to do is we need to use generic types. So in button component as well, we didn't had that much different complexities that we could use generic types, but still we created a very basic generic type there. But in this one we will be using the generic type for our list definition. So let's quickly start with this. So we'll define the item interface. We are using the generic T type here. So that's the idea. First of all, we will need the text or the label for the menu item or the item, then whether it has an icon or not. So we can use that icon as well. Then if we want to have any description for the list item, we can also have that in the design as well. And finally the value, which is the identifier for the item. And our interface for the item is complete. Now we are going to define the drop-down props. Our drop-down will contain this item as an array, so we will start defining this here as well. So we will create the drop-down props type, and here we will define the items, which is the array of the item definition. Then we need an onSelect on this. So whenever we select an item, what actions we want to perform, that callback can be provided from the outside of the component. And then we need some drop-down classes if we want to provide them from outside. Again, this depends on the requirements, but if you're creating a library, for example, for where you want to provide the classes from outside, let's say a Tailwind library where you have to provide the list of classes to define the styles, so that support we can add using this prop as drop-down classes. But we also need to provide these not just for the drop-down, Now the trigger, we will define here as well the classes. So after this we will define the trigger interface as well, and finally the menu and the menu item classes. So you'll see how we will use them later on in the code. So our drop down props is now defined. Now let's define our drop down menu props and the trigger props as well. Right, so we'll start with defining our trigger props. In here we will have whether our menu is open or not. So that's the first thing it needs. Based on that, it will show or hide the menu item. Then we have the label, and when we have on click event, so that's the main on click which will be responsible for opening or closing of the menu items, and the trigger classes that we defined earlier. So it will come to the trigger props, and then it will use it to add the classes to the trigger component. Right, so our trigger props is ready. Now let's define the drop down menu props. And in here again we have the items that will be passed to the menu, then the selected index. Now based on this we can style the selected list element within the list. Then we have menu classes and the menu item classes also, and on item click as well. So we define the on item click, and it will use the item or return the item on click. Right, so I think we have now defined our types. It's time to just define our main components. So we will start with the trigger, and then we will move on to the main drop-down component. Let's start defining our trigger component. So it will use all the props that we have in our trigger props. Now we'll define the return, and we will use class names that we've defined earlier to include the classes, and also just define the one trigger class. So if we don't provide any default classes, if we don't provide any classes, we can use the default trigger class to apply the styles as well. And then we have just defined the on click event as well, and we have added the tab index here as well. Right, now we don't need this div for now. So, and we need a span for displaying the label of whatever value is selected. And again, we don't need this span for now. And if it is open, the drop down list, then we want to show the caret uplink, and if it's not, then we want to show the caret downlink as well. Right. I think our trigger component is now ready. Now we will move on to our drop down menu component. So we'll again define that menu component. If we look again here, so we have defined the trigger component. Now we'll define the menu component, finally the menu item. So going back to the code, so we'll start with the drop down menu component now. So we will define it again with the props using the generic types as well. So we have items, we have selected index, we have on item click, then we have menu classes and menu item classes, and I think that should be all props. So now the definition of the component. Now we'll use the class names here again as well, just to combine the provided classes with the provided classes with the default. So we have the drop down menu class as well. Then we have items, so we will loop through each of them to define each of the menu items here. So we'll use the key index for now. Ideally we should use a key from the items interface, but for now we can just use the index. For the class name, we will again use here to provide the menu item classes, combine them together using class names. And also if that menu item is selected, then we can use the selected class here as well, based on comparing the selected index with the provided index. Right. And we also now need to define the design of the list item. So we will have an icon. If the icon is provided from the outside, and then we need item.text. We want to show the text, which is the main label of the item, and then the description of the item if it's provided, and finally we will just close this component. I think this dev is not needed here, and our drop down menu component is also defined. For our drop down component, all the logic that we have, like the business logic of the drop down component, we want to abstract that from outside of the drop down component, so that it's not mixed with the presentation layer or the presentation logic of the component. So we will use a custom hook for the drop down, which will be responsible for containing the state variables and defining the functions which are responsible for the functionality of the drop down, so that our drop down component is really clean to just output the triggers, the menu, and it's easier to understand as well. So we'll start with defining the use drop down custom hook here, and we will use that. So custom hook, again, it will have the items as the prop. It will also define whether the drop down is open or not, and that we can use to open and close the drop down as well. Then the selected item, it contains whatever item which is selected, and by default it's null. And the selected index as well, just so we have more flexibility of control. Now we want to define the function for toggling the drop down. So very simple function. If it's not open, it will open it. Quite straightforward. And we will have a close drop down as well. Now the close drop down is needed to define, for example, if we want to close the drop down component on outside click. So we specifically need the close drop down, or if we want to add a cross icon and when you click on that, you need to close it. Then we'll define our returns. All of these variables, state variables, will be here. And we will just end this component custom hook. Sorry. Now let's get back to our main drop-down component definition. So I'll just quickly paste the initial definition of the drop-down. You will see again it's using generic type and it has all the props which we've defined in our very main drop-down props interface. So they're also there. Then we have used our custom hook to get all the state variables and the functions that we need, and we have also extracted them out from the use dropdown custom hook. Then we've defined a dropdown ref that we will use to link the dropdown with the ref so that we can control open and close from outside. For example, when there is a outside click handle, so if there is an outside click, we want to close the drop down. That's like very basic functionality of the drop down. And we've added the mouse down and events here as well, so that we can close the drop down on mouse event outside of the component. So from here we will just start defining the main body of the component using the return. So we will just do the return and then gain class names to combine both the classes, and the ref that we've defined, we'll use that as well. I don't need the div for now. Let's define the trigger component that we defined earlier. Now we are going to use it here in our drop down component, and we want to use the, if there is an item already selected, we want to use that as label. Otherwise we've just put placeholder text as well. Now if the drop down menu is open, then we will use our drop down menu component here. Now you are going to see the advantage of defining all these components separately, so that when we are defining the actual drop down component, it's really easy and organized to just include those components with their props, and it makes the component really readable and also well organized as well. So we are just going to define some basics here. And we are going to pass the menu classes to the child component and a menu item as well, so that the drop down menu can then actually pass the menu item classes to its children as well. Right, so I think that was very easy to create using our already created components. Finally, we just need to do the export, and let's quickly see. We have all the types defined, we have the trigger component, we have the drop down menu component, we have the custom hook, and we have the drop down component. Ideally they should be in a separate file, but just for demonstrating here in this video, I'm just going to add them in one file. Now let's try to use them in our home component to see if our drop down component is working the way we want it to work. Let's go back to our home component. So we are just going to import the drop down component, and let me just quickly define the items list for the drop down. So very basic option 1 2 3 and icon for one of these, just so we can test all the different components or requirements are fulfilled. We also just need a handle select as well. I think we just need to import the type as well. So all these are done. Let me just quickly put the drop down component here, and we are just passing some random classes to see if it works. So we have the drop down component, we have the caret icon as well. Let's try to click. Yeah, we can see our drop down list is available here. One of them has icon, so if we just click outside, okay, outside click is also working fine. Let's select something. Right, so the selection is also working fine, and our caret icon inversion is also working fine. So this component we are able to use properly. So quickly I just want to show the generic types usage here. So now you'll see we created this as a, if I go back to the, so this was a string items, which means the value of all of these is a string, but the value could be anything. So if I just quickly show you with an object definition, that way you will see you can actually use it with any data structure as well. Now you'll see the value has ID as well, so this gives you more flexibility while creating these components. So let me quickly just define these. We'll need a handle for these as for this as well. And finally, if we just define that as well, so that should be, yeah, so you're now seeing the object as well, so that is also working fine. By the way, I just want to show you the classes as well, so that way it will be interesting to see whether all our classes are already getting added here or not. So you see the drop down has the ABC class here. This one, I think we added classes for this one. So this has the ABC class. If we go inside, this has trigger has the T class. If we go further in, we are going to see other classes as well. Yeah, so drop down menu has M, and the menu item has mi. So all our classes, so for example, we are providing these classes for a tailwind based component libraries. We can define or pass all these classes to style this dropdown. So I guess that's all from my end. All of the requirements that we wanted for the dropdown are working fine. Now it's just a very basic dropdown component, but we can extend it. The structure allows us to extend it to any requirements. I hope you liked the video. I'm really looking forward to getting any feedback, and in the later videos we can even try to extend this drop down to further detailed use cases as well. See you in the next video.